My pants.
Oh, that's a great way to start. We're live, right with my
Yay!
pants.
I am wearing pants. Hello, everybody. I'm Franz. This is the Concrete5 Town Hall. Yeah, here we are.
We've made it.
We've made it. We're live. We're going. I gotta adjust my headset properly. Okay. Well, I'm gonna not touch my computer so I don't bounce all around. Let's see. Looking at the agenda for this month's town hall. Oh, Corbin's spell checking it. That's nice. First off, it's just absolutely lovely outside. Spring has sprung. My kids keep asking me if this isn't summer. I said, I don't know. I think summer's going to be 1,000 degrees because it's like already 85, 90 out and glorious. So love Portland this time of year. We're all very happy. Second off, we're actually doing what we said we would do. Amazingly, we're doing a twice monthly class. So not last week, but the week before, Corbin and Mr. Mike Larson led an online class. They picked a different time per John the Fish's recommendation. And what is that? Noonish our time on Thursday?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Thursday. Yeah.
That was just a bunch of words. Thursdays, every other Thursday, or whatever, second and fourth Thursday, I think, at noon Pacific.
That sounds right.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, our next one, I believe, is going to be this Thursday.
This Thursday.
Is that right, Mike?
That's correct. Yeah.
We're very organized.
So on top of the ball with this stuff. What did you guys talking about in the last one?
Last week we talked about getting started with Concrete5. We took a zip file from just the download page. We got it up and running, and then from there we converted it to a composer-based Concrete5 site, and we looked at kind of what the difference between those two things are and what the benefits and negatives are. Yeah.
Nice. Do you know what you're going to talk about for this one, or are we still just making it up as we go?
We're definitely making it up as we go. We've got some really good suggestions. We've heard a few people talking about, like, it'd be cool to see, fixing GitHub issues just to kind of see the process. I think that's maybe a little advanced for right now. What I'd like to do, I think we did a lot of work to make a really good base project in the last video. I'd like to try to kind of expand on that project and see if we can maybe get some blocks going, maybe a package or a theme or something.
Nice.
And see if we can just keep a running training site going or something like that.
Cool. Well, as you can probably tell, these are very malleable classes. So if you're a Concrete5 fan, but you'd love to learn more, and you're like, man, I really wish they would just get on with it and explain how to do blah, 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 you should be hitting Mike and Corbin up. They are both pretty active in the Concrete5 Slack, and I'm sure they would take your feedback and try to include it in their thinking to some degree. So, and we are committed to doing these the second and fourth Thursday of the month from now until eternity. So, yay. And it's good. We're recording them and sticking them on YouTube as well. So I think we're going to actually start creating some content that other people can benefit from, even if you can't make it to our weird West Coast time zones. All right. So moving along, let me see if I can share my screen. Although that's going to create a weird kind of exception. Corbinception. Okay, let's not do that. All right, so some sad news on a serious note. If you read our blog, you'll know that Hurent or Hurent, or as we knew him, Jeremy Worst, has passed away since we had our last town hall. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about just what a big part of the community Jeremy was. He joined Concrete5 in our first few months of being open source. As we were doing a little research here, and kind of his first post in our forums was a strong suggestion that we standardize block interfaces for a consistent UI before we actually launched a marketplace. So it gives you some sense as to how much Jeremy had been around the bend with us. And man, I remember hanging out with him in IRC and hanging out with him here in Portland, and the love that he put into his local bike community, kind of messenger bike scene in Minneapolis. And we really like that guy, and it was really hard to wake up a couple of Fridays ago and hear that he was no longer with us. So, I mean, all I can do is thank Jeremy and think about the contributions that he's made, and hope that we helped make his journey more fun with concrete5. And I just encourage you to all, if value the relationships with the people that you have. Take some time to reach out and make that personal connection, because I know certainly we all had a personal connection with Jeremy, and when he would come to town to visit, it was always nice to see him. And yeah, he really helped a lot of people get involved with open source, which is something that we should all try to be better at. So don't want to be a big downer, but I did want to just take a moment for Jeremy. All right. How do I not share my screen? I'm back. What else do we have going on? Shoutouts in GitHub. GitHub, do we have anything to talk about in GitHub, Andy?
We do. We've got a couple things to discuss that we can tackle a little later in the show. But in terms of new things that we have had a chance to pull in, probably the biggest little thing that we've added in the last month or so has been I've been trying to get through some pull requests some of which have been open for a few months, unfortunately, just due to our other commitments. And due to the complexity of some of those pull requests. But we are making progress in there for an eventual 8.5.2 release. And the biggest one that I think will make a lot of people happy is you will in 8.5.2 be able to control the number of results in the file manager from the file manager directly without loading the advanced search dialog. This is something from Marv Indy. He's very active in GitHub. Probably he and Locati are the two most active community members at the moment in GitHub. So thank you so much. As you know, through other sort of talks on our town halls, we are in the process of redesigning the file manager and other portions of the dashboard. But that's going to take a while, and there's no reason to. This was far and away the #1 complaint about the file manager when we did our surveys a few months ago. So we have that coming down the pike in 8.5.2. Along with that, we've got some. We fixed some inability to connect to the marketplace sites when you're behind SSL proxy. So thank you, Locati, for that, along with some other bug fixes that will be coming in 8.5.2. Also coming in 8.6.0 that you will see if you're sort of active poking around at the GitHub branches. We are adding the ability to copy, paste, import, and export style customizer settings. This is a pull request that came from Locati just kind of out of the blue. It strikes me as one of those features that comes about because someone really wants it, but it's, this is not something that would have shown up on any of our lists. So it's cool that someone clearly, you wouldn't build this feature unless someone were actively using the style customizers. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, it's very full featured. You copy the whole color set, it exports to JSON, imports, it's the whole deal. And we are adding the ability to specify file storage locations at the file folder level, which has been on the list for a long time. That's pretty cool. That's Marv Indy as well. So, think you've got most of your files hosted locally, but you might create a folder in the file manager for, high value downloads, and that's stored on S3. And anything you drag into that folder just automatically goes to S3 without you having to even worry about it. And we're adding the ability to send private messages to all users in a group, along with the multi-site updates, which have landed in the 8.6.0 branch. That's not coming super soon. We've got some things to improve about marketplace licensing, and we won't launch without a solution for that in the core. But there is a lot happening in all of these concrete5 branches. And we will continue to make progress on the other open pull requests because there are too many right now, and we'll look to get back on track with that shortly.
Very nice.
I will send it back to you, Franz.
All right. That's great. Thanks, Andy.
Yes.
And we can probably speak a little bit about the 8.6 multi-site and the marketplace type stuff. We've been I guess I will straighten up and tell you, well, we will not release 8.6 multi-site until we have a license model in the marketplace that we're very comfortable with. I know there's been concerns from marketplace developers that, hey, our license model is tied to a single install, quote unquote, which means a database and a file system. And, you know, if I'm selling a theme for $30 and you can use it across a single install, and install is now multi-site, then you've basically gutted a whole bunch of revenue for me, which is absolutely not what we want to do. And so Andy and I have been kind of scratching our heads on that of like, well, that's, yeah, but then it does seem like there are other cases where there's kind of an upper end, like, you want to be able to use some stuff across a multi-site install for as many sitelets, we'll call them sitelets, as you can imagine. And then you might want to use some stuff just on a specific sitelet. And so that's where we got with the marketplace licenses, is that we needed to introduce a second type of license that we would call unlimited, which is not, I've always advocated against. Like, I remember having this conversation 10 years ago when we first launched the marketplace, and I was like, oh, we need an unlimited, a developer's license is what people used to call it. And I used to push back and say, I don't know what that means. Like, I know a fair amount about licensing, and there's no such thing. There's always some kind of upper limit on what you're selling, right? Or some type of limits on what it can be used for, at least more in the commercial space. But I've been proven wrong by the ecosystem. There definitely there is a developer's license on ThemeForest. There's, I think, a consensus that there's at some point where it's really just diminishing returns, right? Like, if I'm going to buy a theme for $30, sure. If I'm going to buy that theme a few times because I'm going to use it a few times, absolutely, that makes sense. If I'm going to use that theme 1,000 times and I'm going to have my own dev shop customizing it and extending it, like, is there not a point where, like, I've invested enough in that it would actually just make more sense for me to build my own theme, I guess, if you want to look at it that way? And shouldn't there be an opportunity for a theme developer to make a few grand off of that type of relationship, and then say, look, your copy is yours, you go do what you want with it, and you're not going to get support forever, but if you just want to have the flexibility of knowing that the code base that's in your site is licensed to you and you can do what you want without any kind of weird custom licensing, then here's a way to do that. Now that we're doing multi-site, that kind of makes more sense to me. So where Andy and I got in our last strategy about this is we were going to introduce another license type that was unlimited, and you would be able to use that across all of the sitelets in an install, or just across as many sites as you're running. Like, it would be the kind of traditional, shareware-ish feeling unlimited license. And then we would make sure that within multi-site itself, that if we would check the license type when you're using packages, and we would build some interface. So if you're using a single install license, we'll only let you use that on a single sitelet within multi-site. And if you're using a unlimited license, then it would be available across all the sitelets. And obviously that's going to be some real work to do, but that seems to make sense to us as we kind of like go over the different permutations of how someone might use this. I can easily imagine, so there's any number of businesses that kind of run small websites for verticals, like, dentist websites or whatever. And I can easily imagine them saying, look, there's a few blocks that we just want to use on every site. We want to use this linked list builder on every site. So we're just going to go ahead and buy an unlimited license with that. And if we need changes or improvements, we'll hire that developer, hourly or fixed bid to do that type of stuff. Versus a theme where really is, I'm just going to buy it for the actual sites that I'm going to use it on, because every site looks a little different. So we like to think that gives us the best of both worlds. There's a thread about this in, I think, the public forums. I don't think that's in the leaders area. There's a discussion thread that was pretty active a couple of weeks ago as we started talking about it. So if you've got more perspective that we're missing, by all means, jump in there. Part of that will mean rebuilding the marketplace, so it's not an insignificant challenge. We've been talking a little bit about how we're going to do that as well, and we think, at least last time we chatted, is decoupling marketplace listings from e-commerce a bit. So kind of thinking of having an e-commerce engine that we can use for checkout and payment and shipping too. Right now, if you try to buy a T-shirt from us, it's like you might as well fax in your order from the 1970s. It's a completely disparate system, and it's really awful. So we want to kind of integrate all of our systems for taking your money into one, because that would make our lives a lot easier, and probably yours too. Right now, if you host with us, that's different than Marketplace. So we've got all this stupid accounting that we do to move things around later. So that should all get consolidated into one thing, quite possibly powered by the very impressive open source community store project we talked about a month or two ago. I think last month. I don't know. At some point we demoed that in a town hall. And then that would let us make the marketplace more content focused. So we could keep the PRB, could probably repurpose a lot of that functionality to work in version 8 dot whatever. But we could get some more. When you're making pages about your add-on, those don't need to be attributes against a product block in community store. Those could just be pages in a marketplace. And that would let us do things like make the marketplace include pages around things that are in GitHub and not really being sold, but still belong in the idea of a marketplace. I think Andy put it very well when we were discussing this, and he told me, look, we call it a marketplace, which sounds like we have this thing in Portland called the Burnside Market on every Saturday and Sunday, where you go and it's like a bunch of vendors that are selling stuff, but each transaction happens with the vendor. You're buying, mobiles made out of plateware and that kind of thing, but devil sticks and whatnot. But it's not a store; it's a marketplace. It's a bazaar, and we call it that, but then we kind of treat it as if it were a grocery store, and all the purchases come through us, and you're guaranteed a pretty aggressive level of support. And I don't know, I think we need to kind of rethink that a little bit. If we're calling it the marketplace, it really should reflect what is happening in the entire market around concrete5. And I don't, we certainly want to continue to provide the level of support that we do, or the the type of dependability that we do. I think that's a great differentiator, but we also want to make it a little bit more fair towards developers who may be getting support requests for licenses that seem like they're perhaps moving around or were bought a long time ago. So that is all the thinking we're doing. Again, there is a forum thread that we'll put a link up somewhere. So if you've got more thoughts on it, or feel that your concerns have not been expressed there, I would encourage you to post there, because we are starting to think in more detail about that. I think I'm also going to switch order a little bit and talk a little bit, or shoot it back to you, Andy, to talk about single sign-on, because we've been mentioning, really since the end of last year, that we were working on a more robust single sign-on solution inside of concrete5. That the first step towards rebuilding the community was to take this work that we're doing for the Army, where we would really have kind of an authentication provider and like almost concrete5 my account, where all it does is keep track of everything we know about you, and then manage permissions for different sites like documentation or store or marketplace, etc. So we've been working on that, and we've actually got it built, and it's working with a bunch of stuff that you guys don't need to know about for the Army, but it is pretty cool because it does not just authentication, but authorization, if I've got those words properly assigned. I think I figured that out. Do you have anything that we're allowed to show on that, or can you talk about that, Andy?
I do. I took some screenshots and I tried to doctor them to remove anything that might be, potentially problematic.
Please
there really
throw
isn't
up
very
something
much
that just says censored over the entire screen. And
Redacted.
Redacted, exactly. Okay, so let's do this real quick. Okay, can you see my screen?
Sure can.
Just the screenshot.
API integrations. Yeah.
Awesome. So the idea behind this add-on, it is a concrete5 add-on running on a concrete5 site. The idea is you have one-to-many concrete5 sites, as we do on concrete5.org. We've got our marketing site, we've got our documentation site, we've got our translate site. Those are all sites running version 8. And then we've got our legacy site, which in this stack goes away. So we've got these version 8 sites, and what we're going to do is we're going to create another site. In this example, it's account.concrete5.org. That is basically another concrete5 site wherein the users are the source of truth for all the users on the rest of the sites. And we kind of do this already with our legacy site. When you log into any one of these version 8 sites, it actually bounces you to the legacy site and uses OAuth to authenticate you. But one, that's legacy code and it is totally custom for that integration. And two, we don't pull any groups or anything like that from the legacy site when we take you onto like the translate site, for example. So if you add a user to a group on the legacy site, it just kind of is used on the legacy site, but it doesn't impact anything on any of the other sites that use that user database as the source of truth. And then beyond that, if you update your user details on the legacy site, it doesn't propagate to any of the other sites. So it's kind of a half solution, and this is the full solution. So what I'm showing you here is a new page in the concrete5 8.5. This is the API settings page. You have to turn this on by going into the dashboard, and there's not a whole lot you can do with it yet. But what the idea here is you enable the API, and you create what is called an integration with from your client site. So in this example, this might be on translate.concrete5.org or marketing.concrete5.org, and you integrate with the source of truth authentication server, which in this example is account.concrete5.org. And so when you do that, you give it a name, and you get a OAuth client ID and a client secret, and then on your on the actual, and this points to the account site that is going to be our source of truth. And so on account.concrete5.org, you would install the user portal add-on. This is something that is private right now. I don't know how we're going to release it. I assume it is just a Concrete5 package that installs into a base Concrete5 site. And when you do that, you are able to register different Concrete5 sites. So in this example, I've added a record for the site I was just on. So this might say translate.concrete5.org. You might have, in our ultimate stack, you might have translate.concrete5.org, marketing, marketplace.concrete5.org, documentation, etc. You'd have one entry for all those. And when you go in to add a site in the user portal, you give it a URL, you give it a user group on the local account.concrete5.org site, and you plug in the credentials in the API section that you were given. You plug in the credentials that you were given on the client site. So it basically makes a connection from account.concrete5.org to any of the sites that account.concrete5.org will manage. And then once you do that, it just keeps everything in sync for you. When you add a user on account.concrete5.org, it will add a user on all the different sites. If you need to import users from existing sites, there's a command line utility that will actually pull users and groups and user group associations from the sort of the target sites back into the original source of truth. It takes care of merging for you. It takes care of user group syncing. It does that using Concrete5 events, but you can also rerun things manually. So here you can see I'm running a sync status report. I'm syncing groups between between this site and concrete5.org. And basically what that does is it looks at all the different groups that you've defined underneath your concrete5.org site parent group in this site, and it says, do I have a corresponding group on the client site? And in this case, it does. It shows you what the IDs are locally and remotely. But you can, when you make new groups, if someone makes a group on your client site and you rerun your sync, you can choose whether you want to make it so that groups made on the remote sites come back to the account site, or you can say, nope, the account site is the source of truth and I'm going to actually delete groups from the target sites so I can make sure that everything is always in sync with my sort of overarching account server. So there's a lot of flexibility there. We are using this in production. It's going to power the ultimately our reworking of our My Account area, and we're pretty excited about it in terms of it being a way to keep all of our sites our site users in sync and really be able to add users to groups in one spot and have those groups, have those associations automatically affect potentially many different sites. It's pretty cool. And I expect, I don't know how we're going to release that beyond it being just a concrete5 package. I don't know if this is something we're just sticking up there on GitHub or not, Franz. That's kind of more in your purview. I don't think we've made a strong decision on that yet, but yeah, I'll toss it back to you.
Muted. I think that, thank you, Andy. I think
Yeah.
that, Inception. I think it's super cool that we're able to pull that off. It's definitely one of those problems that every time you kind of go to a whiteboard to think about it, you're like, oh, and what happens if you add a user over here? So, absolutely one of those like hills to climb when you're like, oh, I started to make authorization work too. I was just like, oh, wow, look at that. Look at you go.
It's like, why it's already so hard. Just make it a little harder and finish it.
Make it more complicated. I think it's open source. I mean, I think this is the kind of thing that I would never want to. I just don't know how we would price it, right? Like,
Sure.
we're going to stick that in the marketplace for $35 and try to help somebody figure out their permissions model via remote. Like, it just sounds like a nightmare. So I think much like a lot of the stuff that we're doing these days, and this probably informs some of the marketplace thinking is happening. I would want to see anybody who would want to use this be able to use it. But if you want to find qualified help to help you with it, I'm sure that we or others would be happy to get paid to help some client configure it. I mean, every time we've had to do this for a client, it sounds like this should take an afternoon, and a week later, you're talking to someone in IT that kind of knows what they're doing. And I just think this is more of a services problem than a product problem. And I don't want, I wouldn't want, here's a good kind of bellwether for like, it shouldn't be in the core because obviously most people don't need it. But in kind of the older spirit of like, is this the type of thing that we would want everybody to do the same way? Okay, let's put it in the core, right? Like the reason that we have permissions in our core as opposed to as modules like Drupal might. Well, yeah, like I don't want somebody else being like, I think I could make a single sign-on that costs $10 less than the core teams, so I'm going to go do some single sign-on light and like let's have competing that doesn't seem healthy. Let's stick it in GitHub and get other people's help, because I'm sure that there is wisdom out there that we don't have that we could benefit from on this. So free, but pay us to help you.
Awesome. Makes sense to me.
Awesome. Let's see. Now we had talked a little bit. There's a couple of, I'm going to do a quick plug. So first off, I'm just going to take a moment in the unlikely event that any open source developers are watching this that are about to build some new exciting framework or product. I beg of you, please don't use Graph or React in the name. We have enough. There's enough different products that aren't the same thing that use the word Graph or React. It's very confusing for an old man like me. And I guess they all kind of like, it's okay, but no. That said, we've got two different things that I think we're going to actually talk about next month. We've got a project from Lemon Brain in the concrete5 Slack that uses GraphQL, which is a kind of an API server and approach to do some fast WebSocket stuff that I don't fully understand yet, or we would be talking about today, but we're going to spend a little time thinking about that. We also seem to have lost Corvin, which is weird. So, okay. But Corvin's working on a very cool, oh God, what's the database he's using, Andy?
Neo4j.
Neo4j. Separate, we're calling it a content server or personalization server. We haven't quite figured out what the name is, but we're building an ad server, so it's a separate beast and it's brutally fast. And it serves up content blobs out of this graph database.
It is a graph database.
Right. It's so
I know.
hard. Every day it just gets harder. And it's impressive and fast and wonderful. And we are in the process of feeding it data from express objects. So that's pretty cool. We'll have a user interface for managing advertisers and campaigns and ads for this client that is all built in Express, because that's a lovely way to build out a simple relational database. And then it will feed data to this graph database and blistering fast backend that Corbin is working on. So next month, when Corbin has internet and we've had a chance to look at this completely unrelated product that happens to have graph in its name as well, we will talk about both of those things. But today we're not going to. We will today, if I can make my screen work. Corbin's got to get on his internet bike, because he's going up and down. It's funny. Let's see. I'm gonna share my screen. See if I can pull that off again. Come on, big money. Screen share. Super duper. Share. Inception. Awesome. Want to do a quick shout out for Extreme Clean, developed by the one and only John the Fish. Very beefy approach towards cleaning up old data, old versions, stuff that is going to slow your site down, and stuff that you don't want on your site if you are trying to be really thoughtful about GDPR, which says, hey, you should probably get rid of data unless you really need to keep it. So I'm scrolling through. Hopefully you're looking at my screen. Lots of stuff that it'll do. Obviously, he accepts no responsibility, but you can pay him to help you. Very cool. All 5 out of 5 reviews, because John the Fish, so of course his work is going to be choice. So I wanted to shout out there, little nod to Great Choice with Greg Joyce. Go check out Extreme Clean. It's a good add-on. All right, jumping back to not screen sharing. How do I do that? Aha. Okie dokie. We are into the exciting discussion phase of our town hall. The first one that I have up, I'm not sure how Corbin's doing. If you're
He's back.
collecting
I see his
questions
face
in the
down there.
background, that's great. So we got a couple in our agenda here, and then I'll let Corbin kind of do a little farming out there and wherever our chat room ended up to see if we've got additional questions. There is one discussion. I'll see if I can bring it back up on the screen share. Happening on GitHub that is worth a quick chat. Screen share. God, this interface is a pain in the ass, Google. Why has everything got to slide around? There we go. Come on. Share it. Super duper.
Hi.
Hi. How about a built-in recovery mode? All right. So again, John the Fish suggests that as concrete5 has matured over the years and become less and less scripty and more strongly typed application-y, one of the side effects of that is it is possible to bork your site by installing sloppy code or removing things that needed to be there in a pretty wholesale way. And yeah, it's interesting. As things become more interdependent, failure becomes more catastrophic. So not surprising. But he advocates for, look, there are times when it would just be really nice to be able to somehow uninstall those packages and get things back to where they were. And he's getting a fair amount of buy-in from people. Couldn't agree more. Very interested in the idea. Couple of different approaches. There's Hostco coming out of the blue. Boom. Probably long overdue. So I guess a couple of different approaches. One was we could just drop a PHP file somewhere special in the directory structure. And if you hit that file, then, with some type of password as well, you could be able to get into some custom dashboard where you could remove packages. There's some pushback of, hey, I don't want to have to drop a file in there, because often the people who I need to help who are doing this are not going to be capable of firing up FTP and doing that. Yeah. It also seems like it's a little bit of a security risk to just have like, oh, if this file happens to exist,
backdoor.php.
yeah, totally. Yeah, and so that's my comment as I was looking at this yesterday is this is great, except oh my god, security is a concern. So we really need to think that through because this would, I'm sure Corbin. Oh, I don't know what Corbin thinks, but I imagine Corbin is thinking, oh my goodness, this would be an attack vector. This would be where I would start if I were trying to hack a concrete5 site.
You got me pinned down.
Oh, I know you. I know you. But that said, like we definitely have login. Like there's just you can't treat the world as all nefarious. You got to build features that people need. So I'm curious as to what you guys think, Andy, Corbin.
I mean, what do I think? It's okay. So in this case of using this tool, the site, you only use this tool if the site is totally hosed. So it's either a local development site that you've managed to screw up, or it's a live site, in which case, oh Lord. But the idea being that you would want to do this in such a way that it only affects your session or only affects you without changing anything else, I think is not something we need to really consider. I don't know if that was something that we had considered or not, but I feel like there had been some discussion about it puts your session into this sort of protected mode. I don't think that's necessary. Like if the site is bad enough for you to use this tool, like I think that it makes sense for there to be some way for you to temporarily disable any custom blocks and packages without removing their content. And so I'm wondering, like, I don't even know, like, it seems to me that you could do this with some kind of a config value that would determine whether you actually ran the package on start methods, or did not. And then perhaps whether you rendered anything that had a package ID. That's potentially pretty problematic in terms of what you might, how much code we might have to change. Beyond that, all I would say, and I would be interested in what Corbin would say, is, it doesn't fulfill that one use case that you were talking to me, that you mentioned, Franz, which is a valid use case. But I feel like this has to be this is like a console command and not like, and not like, and I mean, I guess I see where someone's coming from, whether like if they're unable to like add a file to the file system.
Yeah, but who are
they're
they
not going to run?
Like they've got a web host.
Run a console command,
right? They've got a web host somewhere. Like this could be something we could train support at. But like it seems like authentication is the concern. Then we should just make it so you have to be able to get to the file system to do this.
My biggest concern with this change would be that packages can add authentication types, and we've done this in the past where we completely disable concrete5's authentication and we implement our own authentication type with a package. And so if we were to do this sort of thing and just disable everything and get to a concrete5 login page, we either wouldn't be able to log in, or it would be a backdoor that we hadn't considered. I totally agree that it makes sense to have it be like a CLI command, but it's important to know, like, not everybody can do CLI commands. So I don't know. I think ideally for me, it would be a command that says, like, log me into recovery mode as this user. And then it gives you a one-time use URL that you can then take to log in as that user in that recovery mode, so that we're bypassing authentication entirely. Just getting you into that, like maybe only dashboard, no blocks rendered kind of thing. But yeah, that's my main concern, that packages could be implementing the authentication and even like firewall-y kind of functionality.
I mean, we've done that. I mean, not the recovery portion of it, but we actually have a site that has such weird, stringent authentication types that it's very possible that you could find yourself in a situation in which no one in the world could actually authenticate into it due to some kind of a misconfiguration or a screw up with the types of hardware used to authenticate into it. And in that case, we've done that. The site itself is behind a VPN, so we know that if you're on the file system of the server, there's really very little to be worried about. And so we've done that. We have a custom console command that gives you URL that you can hit one time that will then log you in. It doesn't do anything from a recovery standpoint, but it lets you get that access. Yeah, I mean, I agree, Corbin. I don't feel like we necessarily need to deal with the front end component of it if the back end tools are robust enough. Like if you've done something to break a site because your block has a template error, and so now the homepage is borked and you can't change it back on the homepage, it's like, well, then the versioning tools on the sitemap should be able to take
and that seems pretty clear from this thread. I mean, the gist of the GitHub issue is like, this is for uninstalling packages.
Yeah.
That like, and they, they're even pretty clear about like that would be all. Like some people are suggesting it's a straight up custom interface where it's not even the dashboard. It's just a screen you can get to be like, here's the crap you've installed on top of your concrete5 site. Like what shall we remove today? Because as soon as you get into,
I mean, we have a package install and uninstall console command. Like I get that. Like, is this real? I mean.
Well, one thing to consider is that if you install a package, oftentimes if it breaks, like with I've seen this all the time with like entity problems, like you need to run an upgrade or something, it'll also break the CLI just because it's running the same sorts of bootstrap.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's maybe that's an angle that we could attack with just having some kind of flag with the CLI command that limited the bootstrap to not include packages.
That's fun. I could totally see that. Or, I mean, even I would posit that some of maybe not even a flag, like an attribute to those commands. Like there's no reason that some of those core commands ever need to run third-party code. Like you do not need to run third-party code in order to install a package. There's no that could only, like, all that's going to do is like give you pain, I guess, like unless there's like some logging you're adding or something along those lines. But yeah, that could certainly be a command line argument that you add to all the commands as well. Like we have certain arguments where we don't want you to run certain commands as root, so we've added a argument to command line commands, pretty much globally, that you can override that setting, but it's we make you jump through some hoops. So we could certainly do the same sort of thing to certain other commands where we say, if you specify this option, it will skip all of the custom code. And in that case, you're right, Corbin. It's not custom block templates or custom blocks being installed. It's really just the onStart method that has gone awry, or it's the custom entities that maybe it clears them in that case. Something along those lines.
All right, so just to wrap this one up so we can talk about some other ones, I guess. Few different areas to think about with this. First off, it sounds like we're saying, core team recognizes that this is something that would be nice. It's not something we're probably going to spend our time on. It feels to me like, look, if we were providing support for someone, we would want to get shell access, and then we could pretty much do any of this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a problem that we are intimately familiar with. But that said, totally recognize how it could be. And hey, it's open source. So if you guys want to put together something that kind of is safe and makes your life easier supporting small sites via chat, that makes sense to me. It seems like there's two separate problems. One is, well, what does this thing actually do? And it sounds like we're saying, the more encapsulate is probably not the right word, but the more kind of bespoke it can be for just uninstalling these packages without loading concrete5 stuff, the better, which is pretty much where they're already coming from, right? They're talking about recovery mode or safe mode in Windows. It's like, how little do I need to load to get rid of whatever you've done? So a standalone type thing, sure. And then I just think the other thing that really should be its own, for Andy to accept this, it has to be very thoroughly thought out about security, because as soon as Lisa, our CISO, hears about this, she is going to freak. And this just reeks of backdoor. So
yeah, and I mean, one of the can we shut down certain avenues of exploration at this point? Like, I'm not super comfortable with just another login flow.
Yeah,
that's just enabled by default. Like, that doesn't. There's no value. Like,
yeah,
secret logins. Like, there are no secrets.
No, that's not going to cut it with the crew we're working with. Mike Larson points out in chat, and I think this is a good idea, because I pointed out as well that we could do an email token, right? There could be some kind of, oh, you need to do this. Well, when we install a concrete5 site, we ask for an email. So, we do have some sense as to who owns this. So we could send an email saying, well, here's a one-time token that would make this happen. I mean, downer with that is, well, emails break, but then we're also logging that. So I could see someone exploiting that if they had access to a database and they tripped us, and now they can get that token out of the logs table.
I mean, the sad truth is, if they can do that, they can reset the password to the admin account. So
that's true as well. Yeah, I guess to me, it's like, if you can get to the file system, even just to change a parameter somewhere, or maybe it doesn't have to be a PHP file you drop in. Maybe it's just a config parameter that you switch. But how could this sit on top of? So someone's going to have to make a compelling argument that our CISO will believe that, look, for this to work, you already have demonstrated that you have access to bork the site, right? Like, you can already, if you can already get into the file system and change a file, then, well, you could just delete everything. Kudos to you. If it's built like that, and it makes kind of the support in the trenches easier, I think we can say we would entertain approving it. But there you go. That's how we feel about it today. Yeah.
Recognize the need. Want to try and get 90% of the need, without it being a complete scary vector. But yeah.
Right. The password is just Joshua. If you put Joshua in for a password on any user, you're logged in, and it starts playing war or tic-tac-toe. Okay. What else do we have? I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I think I'm going to toss it to you, Andy. You've got some Mlocati GitHub stuff to talk about?
Yeah, let me pull up those pull requests. How did these make it on here, Corvin? Was he asking about the status on these?
He brought these up this morning. He mentioned he might not be able to participate, so he might not be around to talk back and forth with us if we have questions. But yeah, he pointed these out this morning as things he wanted us to take a look at.
Okay. Interesting. So. Yeah, so these are a couple pull requests. One is adding some PHP security, not security, PHP code sniffing to the actual core, which we use a third-party service installed via Composer for that. But this would allow people doing their pull requests to potentially, lint their code and make it conform to our various needs prior to submitting it, rather than submitting it, having our tests fail, and having us trying to explain, VSRs to these people. I have no problem with that. The issue that he's talking about is basically failed due to some new tests and things that I didn't totally understand, that he's working on. And yeah, some of these are, do not confuse the fact that they have not been merged with some nefarious intent. We've just been busy on stuff like these user portals and multi-site. So that will likely make it into 860. We're just sort of hammering that out. That's the 7765 pull request. And then same with the standardize on IP control access. We've got a couple different ways that we handle IP rate limiting and checking IPs throughout, and a lot of that has been written by Mlocati, and I think he's just refactoring some of it to make it a little bit more uniform. And I don't have a problem with that either. It looks like it's been pretty decently reviewed. I'd love for Corvin to get another chance at checking that out. But yeah, there's nothing systemic about these that's keeping them from being going for, other than the fact that they add 2,500 plus lines of code, and that takes a while to go over. So that I would expect that to go into 8.6 as well, even though it's currently slated to go. It's currently being merged into 8.5.2. Nothing about those pull requests seems objectionable at a specific level. So yeah, gonna keep trying to find time for that stuff, and yeah, it's good work. It looks really nice.
Nice.
Yeah, Locati brought up another issue along with those things. He wanted to talk about GitHub branching and how we name those branches. He mentioned he wanted to confirm that the current branches that we have are developed for 8.5, 8.5 or 8.6x dev for 8.6, and release 9.0 for 9.0. And I think that's right.
That is right. And you and I were talking about this. If I were doing it again, I would not make a release 9.0. I would not name it release 9.0, because release branches are really for finalizing releases, and that was a mistake. So I would expect that to be a 9x dev branch along with an 8x dev branch, and then develop is 8.5.2. And I mean, you could make the argument that develop should be something a little bit further out, because 8.5.2 is these maintenance releases. But the sad truth is, any pull request by default is going into develop, and so you have to spend your time explaining to people which branch they should be making pulls against, and it becomes a sort of numbers game. If most of the things people are submitting are bug fixes and a few tweaks here and there, those should by default go into the next minor release, rather than having to remake all these polls against a different branch every time someone chooses the wrong one.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, ultimately, I think the Git flow guidelines, they don't really handle these kinds of running major versions, separate running major versions well. Yeah. I think ideally, if we weren't having these running patch versions, I guess we could just have releases off of the tags, like release 8.5 or 8.5.2.1 or whatever it would be. But yeah, I don't know. I think I am a big fan of the 8.6.x. I'm not a fan of the -dev, but I won't get into it.
Okay.
I think that makes sense. The develop for 8.5, 8.6x for 8.6, and 9.0x for 9.
Sure, that makes sense to me too.
Now, Locati did recommend a few options here. He said develop for essentially develop for 8.5, develop next for 8.6x, and develop future for 9.0x, just to kind of spread out these kinds of running things across branches. And I think the main reason why that's not ideal for us is just because it makes the managing composer a lot more challenging, where if we have something locked to future, we might end up getting upgraded to version 10 when that's in the works. So it's more ideal to have those branches more specifically named, so that we can manage those a little easier.
Yeah, I agree. That's a little too confusing for me. I would constantly be confused as to what I was installing. So yeah, I agree. I think we're on the right track.
Yeah, well, that was the last of the list of questions that I had. There was one thing brought up while we were talking about the recovery mode. Steph asks, why can't code be refactored to not allow a broken add-on to take down a site, like the way 5.6 works? I think that's a good point. There's a lot of places where Doctrine can throw interesting exceptions that you would never expect, just kind of in weird spots, because you're interacting with the database. And a lot of those times, that's what I'm struggling with, is kinds of exceptions. And I totally agree. Like, when I come across those, I should do a better job of trying to fix those at the source and not just trying to work around it. Because you're right, those kinds of things could be caught and could be prevented. I will say, though, that with version 7 and version 8, there's a lot more opportunity for a package to do things a lot earlier in the runtime, and to handle changing requests as soon as they're entering and things like that, that make it challenging to handle all of those cases. But I totally agree that you're right, that anything that we do that's going to be recovery mode and handle these things should be coupled with an effort to kind of clean up those things that would cause the issue in the first place.
That makes sense to me. I agree, Doctrine, and it's various. Anytime something gets screwy in the cache or in those proxy objects, like it would be nice if we, didn't have to suffer through that breaking the entire site, as opposed to it might just be some more judicious use of, exception handling.
Nice. Well, I think that's it. We've been talking for an hour now, and we're out of questions. Well, not out of questions, but we're out of questions we're going to answer.
We're out of answers.
We're out of answers. That's right. We're out of answers. There's more stuff to do. I'm sure you're all busy, and I want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to watch us blabber about concrete5, and I want to encourage you to join us in Slack and throw your projects into, there's a show and tell channel, and there's also a town hall channel. And we were a little late this month asking for, hey, what should we do a show and tell on? But and otherwise we would have talked about this GraphQL project, because it's pretty neat looking at a glance, but we really just don't know enough about it to really speak with any kind of authority. So we will do that next month, but let's start stacking that up, because it's really cool to see more of the application-y, interesting stuff that people are doing on top of concrete5, and I think that's inspiring for us and valuable for the community. So if you've got something to share, please do so. And on that note, I think I'll say thank you very much, and see you in a month.
Yeah, see you on April 4th next. No, not April 4th. Why am I? June 4th. Wrong direction.
Hell.
See you on June 4th. Don't come on April 4th.
Time machine ready. Yeah. Or you can see Corbin and Mike later this week on Thursday for training.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you're going to join us for training and you got a good idea for what we can do with our base package or our base site that we have set up, throw it in there, and we'll think about it. And we'll see you on Thursday.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.